Big trade at the top. The Jets going up to number 1 to draft Miami's Cam Ward. That leaves Shedeur Sanders for the Raiders at 2, and the Giants not getting a quarterback, but getting Travis Hunter at number 3. Let's get into it. We have Ryan Wilson joining us. We also have Mike Renner here in studio. And Mike, Ryan was being up there in upstate New York by Syracuse. He doesn't get to see a lot of good sports, but this weekend, Syracuse hosted Miami. You got to see Cam Ward in person. What'd you think?
Yeah, I suppose it could be worse, guys. I could live in Iowa and have to be an Iowa fan. So, yeah, I went to the Syracuse game, got to see Cam Ward in person. I won't say that Kyle McCord outplayed him or that Ohio State fans miss Kyle Ward Saturday, but it was a showdown, and I was talking to Amanda about this earlier. Cam Ward is exactly who I thought he was. He is calm under pressure. He makes good reads. Neither of those defenses are setting the world on fire, but Cam Ward wasn't the reason that Miami lost that game unless he plays safety and or cornerback. But I feel the same about him now as I did going into that game on Saturday. Fun game for the Cuse and Kyle McCord. Cam Ward's best days are certainly going to be ahead of him, and he put up another big afternoon. Just couldn't carry Miami across the finish line one last time up here in central New York, Chris.
Yeah, Cam Ward, to me, is the number 1 overall pick, whoever it may be. I do think the Jets, though, are uniquely a team that need to go make a move for a quarterback. There's only 2. We've been talking about it for weeks now. Him and Shedeur are probably the only 2 guys worthwhile to go get it. But this is a guy that could change your franchise. And if you're the New York Jets, you could go get a Jameis Winston. You could maybe go make a play at a Russell Wilson. You could maybe invite Aaron Rodgers back, even though I don't think that's going to happen. But you got to go get a guy at the quarterback position, a young rookie deal quarterback, because you have so many talented players on this roster. It's so good that you can afford to maybe move a few draft picks to go up and get someone like Cam Ward, who then is the face of your franchise, hopefully, for the next decade.
Another team that needs a quarterback is the Raiders, who famously have not drafted a quarterback in the first round since 2007. Ryan, in your latest mock, you do have them taking Shedeur Sanders. Travis Hunter still out there. What are the chances, or as Rick Spielman said, I mean, do the Raiders have any choice? You got to get a quarterback here in the first round.
They have to, and this fits perfectly with what Tom Telesco, the general manager, doesn't like to do, which is trade up or down. So they're sitting there, too, because they played some pretty uninspired football, in part because they don't have a franchise quarterback. And if they're going to sit here, too, and one quarterback's off the board, they got to take the other one. And this, as you can see when you look at the mock draft, is bad news for the Giants, who haven't been Tommy DeVito'd in that they've won 3 out of the six games he started like they did a year ago. But now they're on the outside looking in because there are only 2 quarterbacks in this draft class. And I think with the Raiders, they're not one player away, but when you have someone like Brock Bowers, who is as explosive as he is, with the likes of the quarterbacks they've had, Aiden O'Connell and Des Ridder having to play recently, I think that tells you that if you get a quarterback out there, it makes life easier for everyone else, Jacoby Myers, et cetera, but also for the defense, who doesn't have to come back onto the field after 3 or 4 offensive plays following a punt. So this is best case scenario given the quarterbacks available for the Raiders. But again, and I'll probably be saying this a lot over the next 140-something days, I think a lot of these teams that are in the quarterback market probably wish they had a time machine to go back to last year and take one of those top 6 guys that went.
Yeah, the Raiders need to learn from their mistake a year ago, not getting in on this vaunted quarterback class that we're seeing ball out as rookies, and draft a guy like Shedeur Sanders. He just feels like a Raider. He feels more like an Oakland Raider back when they were in Oakland, but a Las Vegas Raider is a nice consolation prize. The glitz and glam of Las Vegas fits him as well, and he's a guy that leans into that villain role that the Raiders have been known for over the course of their franchise. I do just think he would fit very well and be able to play right away. He's a 4-year starter, a lot of experience under his belt, and has a bevy of weapons there if he did go to the Las Vegas Raiders to throw to that. He could hit the ground running in a way that these quarterbacks are this draft class.
Ryan mentioned it. That leaves the Giants on the outside looking in, and we know how much they need a quarterback. Now, Travis Hunter might be the best overall prospect in this draft. He can play both sides, but how do you see teams, Mike, jockeying in those top 2 to try to grab one of those quarterbacks?
Yeah, these may not be all-world prospects like Caleb Williams or Drake May, but it's still a supply and demand-driven league, right? It's still, if there's only 2 and more than 2 teams need them, you could still get a haul at the top of the draft if you're someone like the Jacksonville Jaguars, who end up with the number 1 overall pick. So I do think that the desperation will still be there. And I think these guys are good enough prospects. That's not to say, again, there are levels to top prospects, but these guys in most drafts would be going number 1, number 2 overall if there were no quarterback prospects. So that still will drive demand, and I still think we see someone desperate enough to go up and mortgage some future first to go up and get that quarterback.
Ryan?
Yeah, and that's a great point by Mike, because it might be a situation where teams have to overpay more than they would in a typical year where the draft class has 4 or 5 prospects at the quarterback position in the first round, because it just feels untenable if you're the Giants to not come out of this draft without a quarterback. So if you have to overpay to get to 1, you got to do it. And if the draft order is as it currently is, the Raiders ain't moving off of 2, and the Jets, if they have an opportunity, are going to try to trade up as well if they, in fact, want to get a quarterback. So that's going to be a lot of the moving parts, and we heard the Giants talk about it in Hard Knocks over the offseason. They were all in on Jaden Daniels, wanted to make a move for Drake May. Clearly, the Patriots weren't going to come off that 3rd pick, and they got stuck. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you look at the free agents, Sam Darnold's probably going to not return to Minnesota, if I had to guess, because they have J.J. McCarthy. Justin Fields probably isn't coming back to Pittsburgh. And then you have the Andy Dalton and Jameis Winstons of the world. That's not a short-term or a long-term fix if you're in a post-Daniel Jones world. So I think this is going to be a situation where we're going to see several teams try to jockey to the top of that draft board, unlike a year ago where those top 3 teams stayed put because they know they needed quarterbacks.
There are teams that don't need quarterbacks, like the New England Patriots, and that's who Mike has said it would be the best fit for Travis Hunter at this point. Ryan, who would your best fit for Travis Hunter be at this point?
It's hard to find a team that he is not a great fit for. I had him going to the Giants because they were just out of luck, so they took the best player available. I think he fills needs on both sides of the ball in New York. They need a quarterback, of course. But Deonte Banks has struggled, the former first-round pick who's flashed at times but also looked like a guy who deserved to get benched, and he has been benched. And they need help at the wide receiver position opposite Malik Neighbors. We've seen his frustration, in part because of the quarterback play, in part because he's not getting a ton of help out there. I think that makes sense. I love the idea of the Patriots. So we were talking with Damian Harris about this last Friday. He seemed okay with the idea of Travis Hunter going to the Patriots as well. Again, I'd be hard-pressed to find a team in which Travis Hunter wouldn't go to and be an immediate success story. Maybe the Bengals could use him, and he could play linebacker, front 4, and cornerback at the same time.
They certainly could use it. It is interesting. He said he does intend to play both sides in the NFL. We'll see how long that lasts, though. Let's go to the Bears. You mentioned Caleb Williams, those sorts of quarterbacks. It wasn't the season. Sorry, Chris.
Actually, for a lot of fans, this is working out perfect because their draft pick continues to get better.
Okay, that's a great point. Ryan has him trading up to 8 to get him a little protection there. And LSU's Will Campbell. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's something that they likely have to do. And I think you'll see more trades in this upcoming draft class because it's a thin class. There's not the blue chip talent that we saw last year. So when that's the case, when you're kind of in that teen range and you're looking at the draft board and you're saying, if I don't move up, there may not be a guy at a position I need on my roster that I have a first-round grade on. And so you may be willing to mortgage some draft capital to go up and get that guy. And Will Campbell on the left side gives you 2 bookend tackles that, for foreseeably, the first decade of Caleb Williams' career, should be in the fold there with Darnell Wright on the right side, another top 10 pick that they had a couple years ago. So there's only 2, him and Kelvin Banks, the only 2 guys I have first-round grades on this offensive tackle class. And when that's the case, Chicago Bears sit pat, and maybe they're drafting 10, 11 where they are right now. I don't think one of them falls to them if that's the case.
No, that's the thinking, right? Because I had him leapfrogging the Saints, who need help at offensive tackle, and the Bengals, who desperately need help along the offensive line and obviously on the defensive line as well. The Bears didn't do it last draft class. At number 9, they got Roma Dunze, and no one was going to push back on that. They felt pretty good about their offensive line. We thought maybe edge rush might be a consideration at 9. Instead, they went wide receiver. And again, I liked it at the time. It just hasn't worked out just yet. But you have to protect Caleb Williams. Maybe overdraft Will Campbell this year, who hasn't been lights out. We talked about him over the summer. Me and Mike and Rick Spielman. I've always liked Kelvin Banks Jr. a little better. He goes a little higher in this draft class. But again, you're rolling the dice on virtually all these guys, probably not named Travis Hunter if he can stay healthy. So you need help at offensive line. You got to protect Caleb. It might cost you a little bit to go up and get him, but you have to do that because it's in your quarterback's best interest and your franchise's best interest. So whatever it costs, move up a couple spots, get that left tackle.
Fired Matt Eberflus over the weekend, but they are going to retain Ryan Poles as general manager going into next season. Going deeper into this draft in just a little bit with Ryan Wilson and Mike Renner, this mock. Ashton Genty's been right there around 10, 11, 12 in Ryan's mock drafts, has him going to the Cleveland Browns. Genty likely to be a Heisman finalist and a chance to get to the college football playoff. More on this coming up next.
Ashton Genty, Boise State running back, Everybody knows his name by now. At 11, going to the Browns. Let's see what else do we have here. Luther Burden out of Missouri, 14 overall to the Buccaneers. Will any of them, and this is for our producer James, will any of them go higher? We found out James likes Creed. Let's bring back in Ryan Wilson here. So let's talk about Ashton Jeanty going to the Browns at 11, right? And I asked you this, we were getting ready for the segment. I said, Ashton Jeanty just overall in the first round, like spots 1 through 15 or so, kind of where he's been predicted. Is this just going to be a luxury pick? I mean, is there any team that's like, we need a running back? I mean, obviously we've seen a spotlight on the running back position this season. What do you think about Ashton Jeanty, though?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, a luxury pick, because when you look back at the former first-rounders who went high, Bijan Robinson was arguably a luxury pick for the Falcons, and Jahmyr Gibbs was a luxury pick for the Lions. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is working out pretty good, and Bijan was misused in the Arthur Smith era, and they're going through their own trials and tribulations now. But I think the Browns are a different situation. Nick Chubb doesn't look to be near 100% coming off that serious knee injury, and that's understandable. Will he ever get there? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with the quarterback situation. They have so much money to eat with Deshaun Watson, and whether he stays or goes, they have a lot to sort out there. Jameis has been an upgrade. DTR is an upgrade. Anyone you put back there is an upgrade. So whatever their plans are at QB, why not help them out with the most dynamic runner in this draft class in Ashton Jeanty? And you talked about his size. I think I'm okay with his size because of everything he does behind the line of scrimmage at the second level and then as he runs to the end zone. Perhaps he needs to get a little bit more involved in the pass game, and I think he has that ability. But in terms of being a luxury pick, it's a luxury that the Browns might want to think about because they have struggled in this Deshaun Watson era, no doubt about it.
Yeah, the running back value discussion is going to be very interesting this spring, especially when you see what Saquon Barkley is doing, what Derrick Henry is doing for their new teams, and this rise of too high defenses, leaving these lighter boxes for elite running backs to really change the calculuses for their respective offenses. And to me, Ashton Jeanty is that tier of running back. You know, he's as good as Bijan Robinson is as a prospect, and maybe even in some ways better. And so in this draft class that I already highlighted last segment isn't the deepest, isn't the most top-heavy in terms of blue-chip talent, where last year when you're sitting at 4 and Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the board, it's just like you make the pick. It's so easy. Malik Neighbors, those picks made themselves. This year's different. There's no consensus at the top. And so when that's the case, when you have a guy who truly is a consensus elite talent, a guy like Ashton Jeanty, who what he's doing at the collegiate level is stuff we have not seen before, or haven't seen in decades if we have, I do think that someone's going to pull the trigger and someone's going to do it very highly. Who could it be? Browns, Titans, Bengals, 49ers, Cowboys. Those are the teams that come to mind. And I do think they'll be very happy when they get this guy in the building.
Over the last 3 drafts, only 1 year did we have a running back go in the first round. And as you mentioned, it was Jahmyr Gibbs, it was Bijan Robinson, and Atlanta picking at number 19. Ryan has them going with Georgia edge rusher Mykel Williams. And you don't think he's even going to be there at this point. Why is that?
I don't. These Georgia defensive linemen over the past few years have been these freakish elite athletes. And when I look at Mykel Williams, he is no different. He's going to be a guy that goes to the combine, and the numbers he puts up are going to have him drafted in the top 10. It's just nature of the position. Defensive linemen, if they test the way they do, they go, that I expect him to do, they go really highly. His former teammate, which I'm not sure if they crossed over, his former Georgia Bulldog, Trayvon Walker, was a similar guy in that always a little bit more physically gifted than he was production on the football field. When I watch Mykel Williams, I see even a little bit more agility, even a little bit more in terms of NFL translatable traits watching him on tape that I think in this, again, semi-weak draft class, he probably ends up going a top 10 pick. But if he's there on the board for the Falcons, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it's funny because I wrote down a speculative mock draft, in part because I have some guys that aren't first-round grades making their way into the first round, and some guys maybe slipping until we find out who they are when we get to the pre-draft process, All-Star games and Combine, as Mike's talking about. Hey, and look, I have the Jaguars trading down, so maybe if Trent Baalke's still there, he can draft Mykel Williams and pretend he's Trevon Walker and not take him first overall, because I think that's around the range. 8 to 15 maybe is where he ends up. But Mike touched on all the points. He was banged up early on, so he didn't get a chance to play as perhaps much as some of these other edge guys. But when he's on, you're not stopping him, and it's just a matter of being consistent from one play to the next, one series to the next. And once you see that, or once the coach can figure out how to get that out of him, all bets are off, because he has a chance to be truly special. And as weak as this class is at a lot of positions, guys, and Mike will agree, the front 7 is deep. And if you need a defensive lineman or an edge rusher, this is the draft class for you. And to Mike's point, maybe Mykel Williams isn't even there in this deep class once we get to the middle bottom third of the first round here.
That position is deep. A position that is not so deep in this draft is the wide receiver position. However, if there's a school that has been able to turn out some of those wide receivers, it has to be Ohio State. Commanders taking one of them at 22. Why did you want to select this one?
Yeah, I want to talk about this wide receiver class a little bit more. Emeka Egbuka, a guy who's been productive over the course of his career at Ohio State, but not so productive, and his tape isn't such that I would go to bat for him in the first round. I think a lot of people are going to watch him and be like, he's a day 2 guy, but I think could be a solid number 2 type of wide receiver for you at the next level. Super high IQ, physical, good after the catch, precise route runner, but just not the kind of athlete that gets you super excited to draft in round 1. But again, we mentioned it. Only 2 guys I have in this receiver class first-round grades on. But that doesn't diminish the need around the NFL for playmakers. It's an arms race. If you're trying to win a championship right now, it's how many guys can I get in my building that can go make plays for you. So for the Washington Commanders, and you're saying, how do we get over the hump? Maybe it's adding that number 2 type of wide receiver, even if you know he's just a number 2 type of wide receiver, and drafting him in the first round because of it.
Let's jump down to number 28, where the Vikings take defensive lineman Deion Walker out of Kentucky. And don't have to go back very far where we were seeing this guy in the top 10 of certain mocks. Why is he sliding, and how far might this slide be, Mike?
Yeah, the tape just hasn't matched. And what we saw a year ago as a sophomore out of Kentucky, and now some of that is he's 6'6", 345. These big guys who are real jumbo defensive tackles, a lot of times their tape can be a roller coaster based off of what they ate for breakfast that day, or how much they were working out throughout the week, or just a little minor injury when you're that big of a dude can really play an impact. But I watch this guy, and from a talent perspective, just what he's capable of at that size is special. It's reminiscent of guys like Albert Hainsworth that could be dominant nose tackles at the NFL level, but 43 pressures last year, only 21 this year. If he's already kind of showing signs of wear and tear, showing signs of slowing down, that's worrisome for a guy, and yeah, I do think he's going to fall come draft day.
Yeah, and we'll see as we get through the pre-draft process, as Mike talked about with Mikael Williams. If he gets red hot, Deion does, that there are going to be some conversations. And when you get to the pro days and see these guys in person, the 6'6", 345, it can change your opinion, fair or not. But we'll find out, because you can never have enough defensive linemen, enough edge rushers. And even if he falls to the second round, you can make yourself a nice little career, use it as motivation if you need to. But I think Mike's right. Not the season we saw this year, but there's plenty of time. We've got 140-something days to the draft for Deion to get right, as they say, and make his way back into that top 32.
We appreciate it, guys. Ryan, as we promo your podcast with the first pick, along with Rick Spielman, I thought this was interesting. You said you're not good under pressure, but you're still turning out these mock drafts like every single week. Is that true? Like you'd be a terrible GM?
I speak to Rick like I speak to my grandfather. Just tell him what he wants to hear and do my own thing. So I'm great under pressure, guys.
There you go. That's what you're going to get. All the insight, though. Very, very good insight on with the first pick.